Welcome to Guided, your weekly sanctuary where we blend the wisdom of the Enneagram with the art of intentional living. I'm your host Evie, and you're so welcome here. Guided is all about helping you, the modern woman, find your flow in a world that's often all hustle and no heart. Whether you're navigating a career pivot, diving into creative pursuits, or just figuring out how to take better care of yourself, Guided is here to support you. This podcast is like a weekly chat with a good friend, one who's passionate about making your life feel good. At Guided, we believe in living with intention, fostering emotional well-being, and finding joy in the everyday. We tackle the big stuff like overthinking, setting boundaries, and avoiding burnout, all while keeping it real and relatable. Think of this as your go-to spot for practical tips, soulful conversations, and a reminder to break free from the grind. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive in. Thank you for choosing to make Guided a part of your weekly ritual. If you're ready to step into a life of intention and empowerment, then hit that subscribe button and let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Guided, my podcast. I'm so glad you're here. You might have worked out that it's my birthday. You might not have realised it's my business birthday. Happy 2 years of the Enneagram Guide. Today is a fun episode. I wanted to kind of look back over the past 2 years, celebrate how far we've come, and share where I hope the next 2 years and beyond will take us. Also, last week I made this big stink about how I'd moved. If you're watching the podcast, remember you can watch the podcast inside the Spotify app. So if you're not listening on Spotify, come over, listen on Spotify and have a little look for me waving. Hi, I'm here, I'm waving at you. Welcome. But last week I made this big stink about how I was moving the background of my podcast and I'd changed positions because when I sit here, usually because I yap for so long, my legs go dead and I get really bad pins and needles. Anyway, it didn't work because I move way too much, and so that made the microphone move, and I need to be near a table for the microphone to be left alone on. So if you're like, Eve, what the heck are you doing back in that place? I'm back on the floor, back where I belong, and back where I'm happiest. So this podcast is called 2 Years of Growth, what I've learned about business, balance, and bliss. First off, what title? Secondly, bliss is my word of the year, and it felt only right to include it in the birthday episode. But today I just really wanted to share my gratitude, share some insights, and tell you about all of the amazing, fun, exciting things that I've got planned for the next year. There are some really fun things coming up, you guys. I hope that you'll find them exciting too. I can't wait to hear what you think about them. Also, this title about balance and bliss and business, I want to be really honest about how I'm feeling and what the last 2 years have been, because if you've ever owned your own business, you know that growth is messy and magical and everything in between. In fact, I think that's true of nearly every aspect of life. So let's go back to where it all started. So I've shared a little bit about this recently, but basically the business came about, the Enneagram Guide came about because I hobbied too hard. And if you have ADHD or are neurodivergent, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I do have other neurodivergences. And you'll know that we tend to have a lot of energy and excitement around hobbies, and often they can lead and turn into businesses. And that's exactly what happened here. Basically, I discovered the Enneagram a long time ago when I was living in Thailand. And I loved it so much. I shared it with my husband. He loved it so much. We began using it. It kind of transformed our whole way of communicating and being. And it's been it's been so helpful ever since. And then we've shared it with friends and family members, and I forced my parents into, I guess the first unofficial Enneagram Guide webinar was with my parents during lockdown in 2020 when the hobby was beginning to take over. And then at the end of 2021, why could I never do this date right? At the end of 2021, I think that's right, I was selling a previous business, and just decided to jump in with 2 feet. And so I sold my previous business in the December of 2021, and I launched the Enneagram guide, what was then the type guide, in January 2022. And I have shared about this before, but upon reflection, that's too much. I should have taken some time. I was just so excited, right? This thing that had helped me and my partner and my family and my friends, that this thing that, was really big in other countries, but nobody seemed to really know about it here in the UK. I was just so excited to kind of going with it. And I guess the adrenaline, the excitement, the joy just kind of pushed me, just kind of carried me through that kind of festive period. And I found myself, and I had wanted to get going with the business later that year, but I just found myself in January thinking, oh, what am I waiting for? Let's just get going now. And there's a beautiful part of that for sure. And there's a lesson learned there that I don't need to go at 100 miles an hour all of the time. It's a lesson I'm still learning. And so my initial vision for the Enneagram guide was quite simply just to help people communicate better. And that's a really basic kind of hope. And yet, that's so needed. Most relational issues are coming back to poor communication, whether that be at work or in our personal relationships. Just so key. And so that really was my initial vision. And I guess to an extent that is still the vision. I want people to communicate better with themselves and with other people. And so using this spiritual tool called the Enneagram, that is my way I help people do that. That is the way that I see huge shifts and changes in culture coming about, because it just is so good at its job. It's so good at helping people communicate well, specifically communicate with compassion, which again is something that is just missing from just huge parts of our lives, existences here on earth. And so my why has evolved as the business has kind of taken shape over the last 2 years. A lot of my one-to-one work has been with women. And so I have tailored my messaging specifically for women. But if you go back and listen to the very first episode of this podcast, you'll know that what I mean by that is I'm just decentering men, I'm not working with men. I'm just centering females. I'm centering women in this space. And, if Mark Zuckerberg heard that, I'm sure he'd be really upset, which if you're listening to this the week it comes out, you'll know that last week he shared a ridiculous thought that workplaces had become too feminine. There's lots I could say about that. I won't in this fun birthday episode. So the vision has shifted a little, but really at the heart of it, I just want people to communicate really, really well, themselves with the dreams that with the dreams and the goals that they're trying to create in their reality, and with the people that they love, don't love, struggle with, want to know. And so it's this really simple vision that is also huge. Imagine if everybody in your life was able to communicate their needs with ease. Guys, you can't even imagine it, right? It would just be so incredible. Let's take it one step further. Imagine if you could communicate your own needs to yourself and hear them, respond to them, listen to them. Can you even imagine it? And so take a moment right now. If you're not driving, close your eyes. Feel into the expansiveness of what that could be like. That is the heart of the Enneagram Guide. That's why I'm here, week in, week out, trying to make that a reality for all of us. Because why? I think we all deserve it. I think we all need it. I think it's so worthy, so needed. And so if we look at breakthrough moments now, I didn't have the podcast last year, so I'm kind of including year one alongside year two. But been some really amazing moments since we got going. A really cool moment is that my very first ever client is still working with me. She still has sessions with me, not as frequently, but she has loved the work so much. She's found the work, in her words, at the end of last session 2 weeks ago, so transformative, she couldn't be without them. Those were her words. That's pretty cool. We've seen each other a lot. We've spent a lot of hours together over the last 2 years. And for that to be her experience, session in, session out, it's just the biggest privilege, and hopefully speaks highly of my character. I'm looking ahead for the podcast for next 6 months, 12 months. I'm wanting to enter into maybe bringing guests on and what that could look like, and hearing from people that have used the Enneagram in their life. And so whether that be past clients or current clients, I'm just working out what that would look like. And I think it would be really, really helpful maybe to hear from not just me about why this is so helpful and why this is such a cool spiritual tool that we should all be using. So I am looking into that. But those were her words. So transformative. And for me, that's just such a huge win. That's such a huge privilege to have as part of my business, that the first client that I had is still here, still checking in, still wanting to use the Enneagram through the ebbs and the flows of life. This client has hit so many personal and professional goals since we started working together. And before that, her words were she was just treading water, trying to keep her head, above the water. And now actually she's flourishing. She's living life rather than just like getting through it. That is what I'm talking about. What a huge, huge win. I just think, I'm just so, so proud of that. Some other wins from the last 2 years, I have been on every single big Enneagram podcast that I wanted to go on. I've been on Enneagram and Coffee. Don't know whether you know that. That's Sarah Jane Case. And I've also did Instagram Lives with Sarah Jane Case. She actually is having some time off Instagram right now, but her account was huge. That was pretty scary. She's a huge audience. So I got to speak with her on her podcast. I was on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Just huge Enneagram podcasts, you guys. Amazing. I was on the radio a number of times. So cool. More recently, you'll know I was in Women's Health, and actually in March I'll have some more news to share about a really cool publication that I'm going to be in as well, in a March-April edition of a magazine that you will know. And then getting this podcast, up and running and off the ground and not missing a week. This podcast has been going since the beginning of September. We're almost to 6 months of it, and I feel delighted that I have met so many of you through the podcast, that I've shown up week in, week out, and hopefully I'm delivering, the kind of podcasting content that feels good and expansive, that it's teaching you and encouraging you all about your Enneagram type and how you can use that to your advantage. So that would be another huge win. And then also about 8 months ago, I was able to work with a really brilliant designer, and I got to have all of my branding done. I hadn't had any done. I just kind of started running at 100 miles an hour back in, that January of 2022. Guys, I've got my dates wrong. It's 2025 right now. Okay. I sold my previous business at the end of 2022, and I launched the Enneagram Guide in 2023. Because 2023, 2024, we're at the beginning of 2025. I think that's making sense. If anybody who knows me in real life is listening to this and has been shouting, I've been saying the wrong dates. Sorry. That's so funny that I've just realised that. Guys, my strong point. So, I got to have all of my branding redone because, beginning of January 2023, I just hit the ground running, got going, and I was just straight into the work, and I hadn't really landed on my branding. I thought it would come, and it'd colour orange, my hair. That became kind of my signature look, as it were. And around March of last year, I began kind of the full overhaul of my website and my logo and all of the visual branding, just all of it. So if you've never been on my website, you should maybe take a little journey there. It's just the enneagramguide.co.uk. It's such a beautiful website. It's so easy to use. And there are loads of freebies on there as well, which I should maybe talk about more. And in fact, maybe I'll bring them up on the screen now if you're watching. But I absolutely adore my logo. And try and point because I don't know how big this will be. And if you're looking at the logo now, it kind of looks like a crown. And for Christmas, I got this ring. And it looks a little bit like a croissant, but it does also look like my branding, and it has 9 kind of parts of the crown. That's kind of what it looks like. It looks like a crown. And there are 9 parts to the crown, and that is to represent the 9 different Enneagram types, and how we all have these 9 different Enneagram types in our crown as part of our soul's like makeup. Kind of looking at our typing, we're trying to find out what our typing is. And we all have access to these different parts of the Enneagram. And when we're kind of looking at our typing, we're trying to find out what our typing is. You know, the one in the middle, the one in the center, that's the biggest one. That's what's most loudest. That's our truest Enneagram type. And then we have our wings and our health lines and our growth lines and all of that. And so I just love how I loved working with Louise. It was such a highlight for me. Anybody who's interested in who I worked with, it'll just be in the show notes. But working with Louise was just so amazing, and how specific and creative she was able to be in coming up with my logo. Yeah, forever grateful. I love it so much. Every time I see my logo, I love it. Which kind of leads me on to lesson 1. I have these 3 kind of lessons that I feel I've learned over the past 2 years about running a business, running the Enneagram guide. And lesson 1 is you don't have to have it all figured out. And clarity comes through action. You don't have to have it all figured out. And this is true of anything, right? In fact, you're not going to have it all figured out. You're not going to have it all figured out before you start, whether that's a relationship, a business, a hobby, a new job. There are things that you don't know. There are things that you haven't learned yet. You can't possibly have it all figured out. So if you are maybe sat waiting on the sidelines, wondering when you'll feel ready to start, I would stop waiting, babes. You're not going to. This is true of any Enneagram number. You're never going to feel 100% ready. Clarity comes through action. And, you know, a friend of mine who is she's trying to be a counsellor. She basically is a counsellor. She was saying, you know, counselling obviously is very different from coaching. And she always says, you know, I'm so focused on action, and that's true. Coaching is present and future focused, not past focused. And so I'm kind of always talking and thinking, and you know how I speak on the podcast, I'm always coming in with it. You know, last week was an actionable tip for each Enneagram type, and that is so true. But I do think clarity comes through action. You can't know how you're going to feel until you start that job, or until you get married or have a child. You're not going to know. You can make the best guess now, and then you just got to get on with it and do it, jump in. So if you don't have it all figured out yet, and there's something that you'd like to do, I would encourage you to do it. You're never going to know until you start. Lesson number 2 is systems and self-care are non-negotiable. They're non-negotiable for sustainable growth. And this is true of any area of life, right? If you don't have systems in place to help support you, if you don't have self-care in place to help support you, it's not going to work. And, you know, a lot of feedback recently, I don't know whether you know, but over on YouTube, I'm doing 31 days. I'm posting every single day in January, a brand new video, 31 days in January. I'm calling it the Daily Dose Diaries. Come over to YouTube and have a little look after this if you're interested. But again, I was talking to another Enneagram practitioner earlier this week, and she was saying, gosh, it's just so clear to me that you're an Enneagram 1. It's just so clear to me that you're an Enneagram 1 because of your titles and themes and focuses on your YouTube this month. And I said, oh, tell me more about that. And she was saying, I kind of have an agenda for everything, a plan for everything. And that is very Enneagram 1. She was totally right. And I think in nearly every area, having systems in place that support us, having self-care in place that supports us are absolutely non-negotiable if you want to move at all forward. If you don't want to move forward, if you want to tread water, like that client I was talking about at the beginning, before we started working together, and every month it was just get to the end of the month if you can. If that's what you want to do, don't worry about systems and self-care. Totally fine. But if you want to move forward, having those systems and self-care in place are non-negotiable, especially true if you are self-employed, running your own business. And then lesson 3, connection matters more than perfection. And clear and obvious when we're all kind of relaxed, listening to this podcast, maybe sipping on a cup of tea. But when shit hits the fan, it can feel like we need to be perfect and that connection matters less, you know? Oh, I've not checked in with friends in the last week, but I'm just really focused on, you know, getting this job done. You know, that doesn't matter. Or I'm just really focused on making this podcast episode the most perfect it could be, and you know, I haven't checked in to see if there are any messages or responses about the podcast. I just have this dream and this idea, and I'm just going to keep on going at it. And can you hear how perfection gets in the way and ruins where connection can really lead and guide us? Yeah, can you hear that shift? And so again, in every area, how can we focus on connection more than perfection? And that's absolutely something I've tried to emulate over the past 2 years of the Enneagram guide. And sometimes I can fall into that trap, because to be self-employed and own your own business in 2025, you do also need to be a content creator. And sometimes that can lead to struggling with comparison. You know, I don't have the biggest account on any of the social medias, platforms that I show up on. That's okay. But sometimes it really feels like it's not. Or sometimes it feels like I can't reach who I'm trying to reach. And actually, I need to remember that connection matters way more than perfection. And it's okay that I don't have 1 million subscribers. Maybe I will one day. But right now, what matters is that sustainable growth coming from a place of connection mattering more than perfection. So those are my 3 lessons over the past 2 years. Maybe I should have done 2, but that third one just popped up and I couldn't help myself. I felt like I had to share it. So you can kind of hear in that where and how I've tried to find balance. And I think balance is this kind of ever shifting state of being. Yeah, it's not like walking on the beam, if anybody did gymnastics growing up, where you manage to keep your balance the whole way along. That's not what life is like, because we're not always walking on solid ground. We're not always walking on a firm beam. Sometimes the ground itself shifts and changes, and we've got to be able to react and respond to that really well. And that's why I think balance is this ebb and flow state of listening to what your body needs, listening to what your brain is saying, and responding with compassion. And so, you know, defining success on your own terms comes into this. Somebody could come and look at my first 2 years of business and think, wow, that's amazing. You've done so much. That's absolutely incredible. Somebody else could come and look at the last 2 years of business and, you know, think that it's not done very well. Because we kind of all have different versions of success, yeah? And that's why it's so important to define success for yourself and not be guided by somebody else's version of it. Does it feel successful to you? What is success to you? What would be a successful outcome? These are all interesting questions to ask yourself about really any and all areas of life. But especially as a creative woman, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, who is navigating hustle culture. You've got to kind of set your own terms of what success is before you head out into the world. If you haven't done that yet, you should do that. If you need help with that, send me a DM. Let's get a session booked in. Success has got to be defined and led by and protected by you and what that means to you. Can't have the world telling you who you are, okay? It won't be compassionate. That's why I've got this whole job. That's why I'm running this whole business. And you've heard me use the word alignment a lot, and I feel like alignment and balance, you know, they're kind of one and the same things, right? When I'm asking you to step into the most aligned version of yourself, I'm asking you to stay balanced throughout this topsy-turvy world, yeah? So some practical ways that I look for and create balance in my life is cyclical living. If you go back, I think to episode 13, I do a whole episode on cyclical living, but, you know, honoring rhythms of you. Yeah, so important. There's no point treating yourself like you're ovulating if you're actually on your period. Those two energies are opposite. There is no point comparing yourself to someone who is in their follicular phase if you're in your luteal. Those two energies are also opposite. Yeah, we have the 4 very distinct versions of us if we're female, if we own a womb, you know, if we have a menstrual cycle. Gosh, it's so important to understand and honor what's going on for us cyclically. And that's something that I do massively. For example, I will never record anything when I'm deep in my luteal phase. There's no point. My energy is very, very low. I mean, from a completely aesthetic point of view, you're actually your ugliest. As in your face changes shape throughout your menstrual cycle. I don't know whether you knew this. Without your 28-day or 30 or 36-day cycle. And during your luteal phase, your face is kind of the most opposite. You look the least like you. There are so many reasons why I'm not going to film myself when I'm in the luteal phase. But that is kind of this, I uphold that month in, month out, because that isn't going to help me feel balanced. I don't have enough energy to meet you in this place when my progesterone is skyrocketing, and I don't have estrogen and testosterone. It's a little bit about what's going on technically with the body there. My energy, you guys, I'm not going to do that. It wouldn't serve you. You'd be getting a half-assed podcast episode. You don't deserve that. I don't deserve that. So I don't do that, ever. We're almost 6 months in. I've never let that happen. And I certainly won't be starting now. Why? Because I'm responding to the ebbs and flows of life. I'm keeping that balance, baby. I set really clear boundaries around, cyclical living, but also set really clear boundaries around work and rest. And hey, maybe that luteal phase point kind of sinks into this one. But, I do set really clear boundaries around work and play. At the end of the day, I work from home. At the end of the day, at 5, I have my shower then, and I will get changed then into different clothes to signal to my body that work is finished now and we're in the evening. That's something that works for me. That might work for you as well. You might need to do that if you work from home. There might be other things that feel better for you. But setting those boundaries and then upholding them, really important for finding that balance. And then building in those support systems. We've got cyclical living, boundaries, and then having those support systems. These are all ways that I maintain my balance. And support systems looks like friends. Guys, I don't mind telling you, I've got the most amazing friends in the world. I've got literally 1 million, and all of them individually are exquisite and amazing. I'm so lucky. Looks like family. I live 2 minutes away from my family. And can I tell you what I'm doing tonight? I'm going round to their house to have dinner and a bath, because I don't have a bath currently in my house, and I love a bath. Let me tell you, it's going to be a good evening. And then also coaching and counselling for myself, All of those things are needed and necessary in order to maintain my level of output, my level of work, my level of joy, play, fun, lived experience. There is that saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Hun, I think it takes a village to maintain an adult, okay? None of us can do this by ourselves, nor should we be. When people talk about being self-made and I did it all on my own and and then we chat, oh, I think we've missed a big community piece. What do you mean you did this all by yourself? You had this big dream and you didn't let anybody share in it. You didn't let anybody help you. You weren't supported. What was going on? Seriously, what's going on? I'd love to know. We are humans. We are built and made for community and connection. None of us are meant to be completely alone. And so building in those support systems and maintaining them really well, so important. So maybe this is a lot like, whoa, Eve, you're really popping off today. There's so many different things to be doing. I'm just sharing about the last 2 years and what's come up and what I've built and what I've put in place and how I've responded to things as I've needed them. But don't get me wrong, it has taken some time to find that balance. It has taken some time to receive that support, because growth isn't linear, right? It's about learning and pivoting and trying again and hearing something on a podcast and trying something new and hearing a reflection from a friend and trying again. And that's what I mean about balance. You can hear it. It's almost written into the cadence of how I'm speaking. It's this journey of kind of undoing and redoing and being. It's this journey of working with the ebbs and the flows of life and responding to them well, responding to those different aspects of life with compassion. What would be the most compassionate way for me to support myself at the moment? I guess that's the bigger question that I'm always trying to answer for myself. Okay, so we've talked about business. We've talked about finding balance. Let's talk about bliss, baby. I've popped down on my notes here. Talk about the defining moments where I felt most aligned and joyful and blissful or proud over the past 2 years. I feel like that's all I've done so far. Every single moment. People often mention energy to me. It's why I think I'm so good at what I do. But my energy is buoyant, okay? And maybe it's worth talking about in another podcast episode, but I was ill for a really long time, I was ill in my late teens through to my kind of mid-20s, I was unwell for a long time. And now that I get to be up and about and living out my dreams, and by that I mean running this business, having amazing friends, having my dog, living life, go for runs and go for walks and cook myself nourishing food, and sometimes making the decision to have a cheeky takeaway, and all these different things I couldn't do for such a long time. I missed out on the chance of being able to go to university. I missed out on so many things because I was so unwell. Now that I get to be up and about and living life, girl, there is not one thing that could take this joy from me. I used to be bedbound and now I can run 10Ks. Are you kidding? The joy is unending. It's unending. And it's emotional, right? Maybe you can hear the emotion in my voice. You can see it if you're watching me, I'm certain. But when I think about what joy has looked like for me over the past 2 years, it's getting up every day and doing this job. And that might sound to some people, but it's really true for me. It's so true for me. When I say that I love my work, I mean it on every level, on a cellular level. I mean it. The word for the year is bliss, and maybe that doesn't sound like a challenge, but when you've kind of been through hard things, and hey, I bet you have because you're a human, not every single moment has to be a challenge. You can just enjoy the bliss. This year I'm choosing to lean even further into the bliss. Why? I'm turning 30. I'm starting a new decade. And not every aspect of my life is perfect. No, there's not. There's lots of things going on, and perhaps we'll talk about those later this year. But I believe there's always more. There's always more joy to be had. There's always more bliss to experience. And that is kind of, the personal tone that I'm setting for this year. How can we choose to find bliss in every moment? What would that look like? But a huge, huge, huge moment of bliss has been and continues to be this podcast. I love showing up in this space. I've got so many dreams about where we can take it and what we can do with it. But I really love it because I love that you listen nearly every week. There is a group of people that listen every single week, and I've spoken to some of you, or I see you on the analytics, and it just means the world to me. I love creating this space where we can learn about ourselves and learn from each other. There is tons for me to learn. Tons still for us all to be learning. And I love that we get to do it in this way. I'm so grateful for you, for listening, for answering in the little polls, for sending in questions. It means the absolute world to me. And so thank you so much for letting bliss be a huge part of my weekly, monthly, almost 6 monthly experience. Thank you for being so on board with the idea of guided. And I hope that the next 6 months, 2 years and beyond continue to be a reflection of how beautiful this community is. I couldn't do this without you, and I'm just thrilled that we're sat here in January on my second business birthday having this conversation, having this chat. I am so, so grateful. So my key things I want you to take away from today's episode is growth is personal and non-linear, guys. Your path is valid. Every part of your path is valid. I'm as valid now as I was 6 years ago when I wasn't able to get out of bed, when I was too poorly and in and out of hospital. Your path is valid wherever you are on the journey. Balance is all about intentionality, not perfection. And bliss can be found in small, meaningful moments of alignment. It's there waiting for you. I hope you find some this week. And this episode might have got you thinking about your previous 2 years, and I'd love to know what you're reflecting on from the past 2 years for you. What has your growth journey looked like over these past couple of years? You might want to write down 3 things that you're proud of and 3 things that you've learned as well. That could be really cool. You could share that with me if you want to. You could share it with a friend. You could just keep it for you. But perhaps the actionable tip, following on from last episode, is maybe, writing those things down, putting them down on paper or in your notes app, and noticing just how far you've come in the last 2 years. And from that place, you can then celebrate your progress, big or small. I mean, can we even define things as big and small anymore? I don't know. The more lean into this compassionate way of being, I think we just celebrate the progress, right? Just before we close for today, I wanted to, not only share this podcast episode, but I wanted to do something fun, celebrate the 2 years of the Enneagram Guide. And so I've got a little bit of a treat for you. I asked on my Instagram last week, but I don't think the story got seen by very many people because there weren't that many votes. So I hope you'll enjoy what I've got planned. But I am offering a really special, really cool, really helpful workbook from overwhelm to overflow. It's called Overcoming Overwhelm, a quick start guide to overflow. This includes things like task batching, creative rituals. There are some Enneagram specific tips in there. It is a really nourishing way to show up for yourself this winter. Guys, the workbook is £7. I wanted to make it really, really accessible. Digital download. It's not only beautiful, but it is going to be really, really helpful over the next 2 to 3 months. I mean, you could use it, you could kind of plan out your day in it, but it is a really nourishing way to show up for yourself in winter. And I wanted to make it a really kind of nourishing price point as well. And I'm offering that at £7. I would love for you to explore that and use that and have that as part of your daily, weekly, monthly routine to kind of keep you from falling into overwhelm, to keep you from falling into that space that my client, who I spoke about at the beginning, felt that she was in before we started working together, when you're just kind of treading water and each month you're just trying to get to the end of the month and it feels like your head could go under at any time. This is my kind of life ring for you if you're in that space. And so these creative rituals, task batching, time management, it's nourishing, you guys. It's really, really good. So I hope you'll enjoy my birthday offering of my £7 workbook. It's going to be so good. It's available now. You just head on down into the show notes. It's right there. It's on my website. I hope that you'll enjoy it. I reckon you're going to get loads out of it. And just jumping in to say that the spring seasonal reset tickets have gone live this week as well. So they are available. Early bird tickets are available. It's not for a couple of months.
If Guided the podcast resonated with you, why not share it on your socials or send it to your friends?
Guys,
and if you have a spare moment, I would love it if you could leave me a review. These small gestures are free and they're invaluable in helping me amplify the reach of Guided the podcast, connecting us with more empowered women who are eager to increase their well-being. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop with our latest episodes. By subscribing, you'll stay connected and receive a weekly dose of inspiration directly to your inbox. Thank you for being a part of our community, for showing up, and for your commitment to personal growth and self-discovery. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and keep exploring the depths of your own inner wisdom.
Here's to more growth, more alignment, and more bliss in 2025. I'll see you in the next episode. Take good care.